Hey, everybody. We are going to be in Psalm 20 today. So let's jump right on into it. This is David writing the psalm. He says, "To the choir master, a psalm of David. May the Lord answer you in the day of trouble." Now, I will just say, in most psalms, this first line is going to be somewhat of a summary statement for the psalm. It kind of sets the tone for the rest of it. So we know that this is going to be about the Lord answering us in the day of trouble. That's going to be the theme of the psalm as we run throughout. That's not always the case, but most of the time it is. May the Lord answer you in the day of trouble. May the name of the God of Jacob protect you. A few things here. Anytime you see reference to the name of God in the scriptures, it's typically directing our attention towards the entirety of who God is. So the name of God would be the revelation of God, how he has shown himself to us in the scriptures. So the name of God is really calling our attention toward the character of God, who he is. And here he's referred to as the God of Jacob. More than likely, this is reminding Israel that this is their God, the one true God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob, of course, his name became Israel, and so it's probably just a way of personally referring to God as the God of Israel. So may this God, may the God, the name of God, Yahweh, the one that we've seen throughout the scriptures, delivering his people, may that God, the God of Jacob, protect you, the people of God. May he send you help from the sanctuary. Now, the sanctuary would be in reference to the holy place. Okay, and this would be the same concept with Zion. So the sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, and the tabernacle, and then in the temple, was the place where the Ark of the Covenant was kept. And just to remind you, probably what's going on in this text, the Ark of the Covenant was placed in the Holy of Holies, which is where God dwelt in pure form, where God was among his people. And so throughout the Old Testament, especially whenever Israel is on their conquests and is battling against different enemies, whenever the Ark of the Covenant would go with them, the Ark would actually be a symbol of God's presence with his people. And the Ark, wherever the Ark went, really it would strike fear into the enemies because they realized this powerful God, this all-powerful God is present with his people. And wherever the Ark of the Covenant would not go, that would spell disaster for the people of Israel. So, for example, in Numbers, I believe it's Numbers, am I getting this right? Numbers 10 to 14, I think. You have to check me on that. But there is a story where the people of, I'm sorry, it's Numbers 14, just came to me. So there's a story in Numbers 14 about these different spies going into the land of Canaan while Israel is wandering in the desert. So they send in these 12 spies who go in to scout out the land that they're supposed to take over, the promised land. And as these different spies go in, they see all these daunting, scary enemies in the land of Canaan. And they come back and they tell the people of Israel who are wandering in the desert, they say, hey, we're not going to be able to do this. This is terrifying. These enemies are huge. They're giants. We're not going to be able to overtake them. And of course, 10 of the spies give that report. And then 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, give the opposite. They say, no, the Lord is with us. We should go. Well, the people grumble. They believe the 10 instead of the others. And so God punishes, he judges Israel and says, because of your grumbling heart, because you do not trust in my name, you are not going to be able to take the promised land. And the only 2 people who will enter among the adults that are present, are going to be Caleb and Joshua. The rest of you will die and will never see the promised land. And so there's a story told where the people say, well, no, we're going to change our mind. We're going to try to go and take the promised land anyways. And Moses says, don't do it. The Ark of the Covenant is not going to go with you. The presence of God is not going to go with you. Don't try it. And so they go and try to fight. I believe it's the Amalekites, and they get crushed. They get destroyed. And so you see there that where the Ark of the Covenant goes, where the presence of God goes, there is victory. So when David is saying, may he send help from the sanctuary and give you support from Zion, he's calling into reference all these times where the Ark of the Covenant has gone, the sanctuary of God has gone with the people and has given them total and complete victory. May he remember all your offerings and regard with favor your burnt sacrifices. Of course, offerings and sacrifices were the way that the people related to God. May he grant you your heart's desire and fulfill all your plans. May we shout for joy over your salvation, and in the name of our God set up our banners. Of course, banners are just a sign of victory. You raise your banner representing your nation whenever you have victory. So David is just boasting, may we have this victory through our God, this salvation from him. May the Lord fulfill all your petitions. Now I know that the Lord saves his anointed. He will answer him from his holy heaven with the saving might of his right hand. Some trust in chariots and some in horses. Of course, chariots and horses were a sign of military strength. In those days, the more horses and chariots you had, the more power you had, the more scary you were to the enemy. David's saying, some trust in that, some trust in chariots and horses, but not us. No, we trust in the name of the Lord our God. They collapse and fall, but we rise and stand upright. O Lord, save the king. May he answer us when we call. And of course, this is just a neat idea of petitioning God to save the king. I want to point out a couple of things. We have up here in verse 6 this language, I know that the Lord saves his anointed. Now, of course, David is the anointed king of God. But David is a foreshadow of the true king of God, which of course would be the one who came from the line of David, who occupies the throne of David eternally, and that is Jesus. Jesus is the true anointed one of God. Jesus is the true king. One thing that's important to notice from this is this prayer that God would save the king shows us that the king is the representative head of the people. So David represents his people, right? So in other words, David's victory is his people's victory. So if God gives the king victory, then God gives his people victory. And man, aren't there some neat implications of how this is all the more true in our salvation from God through the death, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus. Jesus is our King, and as Jesus has victory, we have victory over sin and death. He is our deliverer. So just a couple of questions I would ask you to reflect on in all of this. Let me switch this around real quick. So the first question I want to ask is, when you are in trouble, where do you run? Where do you run? Do you run to God, saying, God, help me in my day of trouble? I know that my help can only come from your presence. I know that I need to run to you and offer you my life, sacrifice my all, trust in you entirely to be the one who delivers me. Where do you run whenever you find yourself in trouble? And this could, any kind of trouble, whether you're caught up in a sin, whether your life is in some sort of suffering or difficulty that you did not foresee, whether you're sad, you're grieving, whatever trouble you find yourself in, where do you run? And then the second question I would want to ask you is, are you trusting Christ alone for salvation? You know, ultimately, we know that we're to understand the Old Testament in light of Jesus. And we know that all these things we see about Israel are even more importantly about God's people and their deliverance through King Jesus. And so as we see all this, as we see David crying out for salvation for Israel, we can understand that God's people need salvation just the same today in a spiritual sense. That God is the one who rescues us from our sin. And sometimes we may be tempted to trust in our own sort of horses and chariots. In other words, sometimes we may want to trust in our own works for salvation. What have I done for God? What can I do to earn my way to Him? But ultimately, we need God's anointed to be our deliverer. We need our King to rescue us. We need God to save us. And the good news is God has given deliverance to His King in resurrecting Jesus from the dead, but also through His King as we trust in Jesus and are saved from our sin by Him. So are you trusting Christ alone for salvation? What are you running to for salvation? And I would encourage you to trust in Him afresh even now. Whatever sin you've struggled with, run to Jesus. He will graciously forgive you of your sin. He will save you from your sin. Don't try to save yourself. You can't do it. You can't trust in chariots and horses. You can't trust in works to save you. But Jesus can save you. And so run to Him. Trust in Him today. Thanks for watching. Y'all have a blessed day.